Have you ever walked away from a conversation and thought, I should have said that, or made a decision that felt right, but later realized it was? That frustration doesn't come from lack of intelligence. It comes from untrained thinking. We're taught what to think, not how to think. And in a world filled with opinions, manipulation, and endless information, that's dangerous. Think Sharper is about reclaiming control of your mind. It's about building the ability to slow down, question assumptions, and respond with clarity instead of emotion. When your thinking improves, your life improves. Better choices, better boundaries, better outcomes. If you're ready to stop second-guessing yourself and start thinking with confidence, like this video, subscribe for more powerful mental tools and share it with someone who wants a stronger mind. Chapter 1: The edge you've been missing. Most people don't lose because they're lazy. They lose because they're foggy. They wake up, scroll, react, repeat. They let the world decide what matters, what's true, what's urgent, what's normal. And then they wonder why they feel behind, why opportunities slip past, why their confidence is shaky, even when they work hard. Clarity is an unfair advantage in America right now, with the noise, the headlines, the hot takes, the algorithms, the constant breaking news banners. The person who can think clearly becomes dangerous. In the best way, not dangerous to others, dangerous to confusion, dangerous to manipulation, dangerous to the mediocre life that sneaks up on people who never learn to question, to test, to decide. Critical thinking isn't some academic hobby, it's a survival skill. It's the difference between buying what you're sold and building what you want. It's the difference between being led and leading yourself. Picture a man in his late 20s in Columbus, Ohio. Good job, decent paycheck, feels stable. One day he sees an ad that promises financial freedom. Just follow this strategy, it says. It's polished, confident, loaded with testimonials. He wants to believe it because he's tired of feeling like he's working for someone else's dream. He jumps in. He invests money he can't afford to lose. A few months later, the whole thing collapses. He's embarrassed, angry, and now he's got debt. What happened? He wasn't dumb. He was hopeful. He was human. He didn't fail because he lacked ambition. He failed because he didn't slow down long enough to ask the right questions. Who benefits from me believing this? What assumptions am I making? What evidence would prove this wrong? What's the base rate for success in opportunities like this? He didn't have a method, he had a mood. Now picture someone else, same city, similar income, same ad, same temptation, but this person pauses, they feel the pull, and they don't judge themselves for it. They simply treat that pull like a signal. I want this. And then they choose discipline over impulse. They look for independent data. They ask how the company makes money. They search for complaints, refunds, and legal filings. They talk to someone they trust, someone who isn't emotionally invested. They decide not to invest. They keep their money. They keep their dignity, and they keep their future open. Same world, same offer, different mind. Critical thinking is not cynicism. Cynicism is a lazy no. Critical thinking is a powerful maybe. That demands proof. You're going to build that power here, not by memorizing fancy terms, not by turning into a robot, and not by trying to win arguments at Thanksgiving dinner. You're going to build it so you can win your own life, so you can make decisions you don't regret, so you can spot weak ideas before they get expensive, so you can learn faster, work smarter, and see the truth more often than the average person. Start with this. The mind is a courtroom. And most people let every thought testify without cross-examination. A fear shows up and says, you're not ready. A desire shows up and says, you deserve it. A headline shows up and says, "Be outraged." A friend's opinion shows up and says, "Everyone's doing it." And the judge inside the average person bangs the gavel and declares it true. You're going to become a better judge. The first habit is separating the world into three simple categories: what you know, what you think, what you feel. Most people blend them. They say, "I know this is a bad idea," when they mean, "I feel anxious." They say, "I know they don't respect me," when they mean, "I interpreted that text message as disrespect." They say, "I know the economy is collapsing," when they mean, "I saw a scary video and it stuck." That blending creates chaos. You can't improve your thinking when you don't know what kind of material you're working with. Facts are one kind of material, opinions are another, emotions are another. All are real experiences, but only one is evidence. Imagine you're driving in a thick fog on a highway outside Denver. If you treat the fog like the road, you'll steer into it and crash. The fog is not the road, it's an obstacle to seeing the road. Emotions are similar. They're weather in the mind, not the map of reality. They matter, but they're not automatically accurate. Here's a simple practice you can do today. When you feel strongly about anything, pause and silently label it. This is a feeling. This is an assumption. This is a fact. The label creates space. The space creates choice. Now, critical thinking also requires courage because you will discover uncomfortable things. You will notice that you've been wrong before. You will notice that your favorite sources are sometimes sloppy. You will notice that your own ego wants to protect itself more than it wants to learn. And in that moment, most people retreat. They defend. They rationalize. They double down. Your edge will come from a different response. Curiosity with backbone. Think about a Marine doing training drills. The point isn't to look tough. The point is to be ready when it counts. Critical thinking is mental readiness. You don't build it when the stakes are low, so you can access it when the stakes are high. When you're negotiating salary, when you're choosing a partner, when you're voting, when you're signing a mortgage, when you're deciding whether that friend is actually a friend, when you're deciding whether your business idea is a dream or a delusion. There's a story that plays out in offices across America. A team meeting begins. Someone throws out an idea with confidence. People nod, not because they're convinced, but because they don't want friction. They don't want to sound negative. They don't want to be that person. The idea moves forward. Weeks later, it fails. It costs time and money. And everyone privately admits they had doubts. Critical thinking would have saved them, not by shutting down the idea, but by testing it early. By asking, "What problem does this solve?" By asking, "How will we measure success?" By asking, "What could go wrong?" By asking, "What would we need to see to change our mind?" Those questions aren't rude. They're responsible. They're a form of respect for reality. Halfway through this chapter, I want you to remember something important. Being disciplined in your thinking does not mean being slow in your life. It means being intentional. You can still move fast, but you move fast on verified ground, not on wishful thinking. If this audiobook is bringing you value so far, take a moment to like it, share it with someone who needs to hear this. Leave a comment with your biggest takeaway, and subscribe to Prime Audiobooks for more content like this. Now let's continue. Let's get practical. You're going to build a simple internal system. Call it your mental checklist, not written on paper, though you can write it if you want. It's a quick sequence you run whenever something matters. First, what is the claim? You'd be shocked how often people argue without knowing what's actually being claimed. A friend says college is a scam. That's not a claim, that's a slogan. What do they mean? All colleges for all people under all circumstances. Or do they mean some degrees are overpriced relative to earnings? Precision turns noise into something you can evaluate. Second, what is the evidence? Evidence is not volume. Evidence is not passion. Evidence is not a screenshot with a caption. Evidence is what would still be true. If you disliked it, it's data, direct experience, reliable reporting, strong reasoning. If you can't name the evidence, you don't have a conclusion yet. You have a vibe. Third, what assumptions are hiding underneath? Every belief sits on a stack of assumptions, like a building on a foundation. If the foundation is weak, the building can look impressive and still collapse. If you assume that past success guarantees future success, you'll chase trends. If you assume that authority equals accuracy, you'll get manipulated by confident speakers. If you assume that your current feelings reflect permanent truth, you'll make decisions that ruin good opportunities. Fourth, what are the alternatives? The mind loves false choices. Either I start a business or I'm a failure. Either they agree with me or they're my enemy. Either the economy is fine or we're doomed. Real life has more doors than that. Your job is to find them. Fifth, what is the cost of being wrong? This question turns you into an adult fast. If the cost is low, you can experiment. If the cost is high, you verify. If you're choosing a new coffee shop, guess away. If you're choosing a partner, a job, a financial investment, a health decision, slow down and test the ground. Here's where many people struggle. They confuse critical thinking with criticism. Criticism attacks. Critical thinking examines. Criticism tries to prove others wrong. Critical thinking tries to understand what's true. When you make that shift, you become harder to offend and easier to trust. You stop being a person who reacts, and you become a person who responds. And here's another shift. You're not trying to be correct all the time. You're trying to be correct more often than your past self. That's the game, progress over pride. Let's talk about the enemy you'll face immediately. Mental autopilot. Autopilot is when your brain uses shortcuts because it wants to save energy. Shortcuts aren't always bad. They help you drive home without thinking about every turn, but in the modern world, those shortcuts get hijacked. A viral clip triggers instant certainty. A political headline triggers instant anger. A charismatic influencer triggers instant trust. A fear triggers instant avoidance. Autopilot is efficient, but not wise. The wise mind knows when to slow down, so build a trigger. Every time you catch yourself thinking, obviously, pause. Obviously is a red flag. It's your mind trying to close the case without hearing the evidence. Every time you catch yourself thinking, everyone knows. Pause. Every time you catch yourself thinking, I just feel like. Pause. Those are the moments where your next decision is being decided for you. Unless you intervene with questions. You might be thinking, this sounds exhausting. It's not. At first, it feels like extra work because you're building a new muscle, but soon it becomes your default. You stop wasting energy on confusion. You stop chasing arguments that don't matter. You stop getting emotionally hijacked by every new outrage cycle. You become calmer because you can name what's real. And calm is powerful. Calm people make better decisions. Calm people negotiate better. Calm people learn faster. Calm people become leaders, even if they never chase a title. One more story. A woman in her early 40s in Atlanta is considering a career change. She's been in the same industry for 15 years. Her friends tell her to follow her passion. Her coworkers tell her she'd be crazy to leave. Her family tells her to be grateful. She feels pulled in 3 directions. The pressure builds until she freezes. Months pass. She stays stuck. Then she changes one thing. She stops asking, "What should I do?" and starts asking, "What is the problem I'm trying to solve?" She realizes the problem isn't the job title. It's that her work no longer aligns with her values. She wants autonomy, growth, meaningful contribution. Now she can think clearly. She evaluates options based on those criteria. She interviews people in different roles. She tests small projects on weekends. She runs low-risk experiments instead of making dramatic leaps. Within a year, she transitions into a role that fits her better, not because she got lucky, but because she got clear. Critical thinking turns big life decisions from emotional storms into solvable problems. As this chapter closes, let these questions sit with you, not as homework, but as a mirror. Where in your life are you treating feelings like facts? What belief do you hold most strongly, and what evidence would honestly change your mind? What decision are you avoiding because you haven't defined the real problem? And if you committed to thinking sharper starting today, what is one situation this week where you will slow down, ask better questions, and choose clarity over autopilot? Chapter 2. Spot the traps before they spot you. Last time, you learned that clarity is an unfair advantage, and that the difference between winning and losing often comes down to whether you treat thoughts like testimony or like truth. You started separating what you know from what you think and what you feel, and you built a quick internal checklist to test claims instead of reacting to them. Now you're going to sharpen the blade by learning how the mind quietly bends reality, not because you're weak, but because you're human. There's a reason smart people make dumb decisions. It isn't a lack of intelligence, it's unrecognized distortion. Your brain is built to move fast, conserve energy, and protect identity. That worked fine when the biggest decisions were about weather, shelter, immediate danger, but in modern America, the threats are subtler. They arrive as persuasive content, tribal pressure, financial temptation, and the constant demand to have an opinion right now. Think of your mind like a home security system. It's there to protect you, but if it's miscalibrated, it will blare when there's no threat and stay silent when there is one. Critical thinking is recalibration. One of the most common traps is confirmation hunger. You feel it when you like an idea, and your attention starts searching for anything that supports it. You see one article, and suddenly you know the whole story. You watch one clip, and now you've got a complete judgment about a person you've never met. Confirmation hunger isn't just about politics, it's about relationships, work, money, and self-image. A guy in Phoenix wants to start a business. He's been restless at his corporate job, and he has a product idea that excites him. He talks to friends who love him, and they cheer him on. He watches videos of entrepreneurs saying you have to just start. He reads success stories late at night, his heart beating faster. He's collecting proof, but he's only collecting one kind. Then reality hits. His costs are higher than he predicted. His target customers don't care as much as he assumed. His marketing doesn't convert. He's confused and frustrated because he did what the advice said. The problem wasn't starting. The problem was building a plan on selective evidence. When you only look for support, you create a fantasy that feels like a strategy. Real strategy can survive bad news. Real strategy invites pressure testing. The sharp thinker doesn't ask, "How can I prove this will work?" They ask, "How might this fail, and what would I do if it does?" That question doesn't kill dreams, it saves them. Another trap is the story spell. Humans don't naturally think in spreadsheets. We think in narratives. A story is powerful because it makes events feel meaningful and connected. But stories can also lie. They can simplify complex systems into villains and heroes. They can make you feel certain when you should be cautious. A story spell is when you prefer an explanation that feels satisfying over one that is accurate. It's when you accept a clean narrative because uncertainty makes you uncomfortable. You see this at work when someone says, "My boss hates me." After one cold email, maybe, or maybe your boss is under pressure, distracted, dealing with 10 fires you don't see. The story that "they hate me" is simple and emotionally intense. But if you treat that story as fact, you'll respond in ways that damage your career. The sharp thinker interrupts the story spell by asking, "What else could be true?" That single question can prevent months of paranoia, resentment, and self-sabotage. Then there's the identity trap. This one is serious because it hides behind pride. The identity trap is when you cling to a belief because it makes you feel like a certain kind of person. You're the responsible one. You're the independent one. You're the skeptic. You're the helper. You're the tough one. And then information shows up that threatens that identity, and your mind treats it like an attack. This is why arguments get heated. People aren't defending a point. They're defending who they think they are. If you want real critical thinking, you have to learn to loosen your grip on identity. You're not your opinions. You're not your past decisions. You're not the image you built to survive. A woman in Chicago buys a car she later realizes she can't comfortably afford. The payments squeeze her. The insurance surprises her, but she doesn't want to admit it because she sees herself as financially savvy. So she doubles down. She tells herself it's fine. She adds side gigs. She avoids looking at the numbers. She gets tense and exhausted. Eventually, a friend asks a simple question. If you were advising your younger sister, what would you tell her to do? That question breaks the identity trap. Suddenly, the truth is clearer. Because the ego isn't driving, she sells the car, takes the hit, and rebuilds with a plan. It hurts, but it's clean pain, not slow bleeding. Here's the mindset shift. Being wrong is not a character flaw. Staying wrong is. Now let's talk about the speed trap. This one is everywhere, in a culture that rewards instant reactions. The person who slows down feels behind, but slowing down is not weakness, it's precision. You don't want fast opinions, you want accurate decisions. Your brain has two modes, quick and deliberate. Quick mode is helpful for routine. Deliberate mode is necessary for high-stakes choices. The problem is that modern life trains you to use quick mode for everything. The news cycle pushes urgency. Social media rewards hot takes. Even conversations can feel like competitions, like you need the perfect response right now. So you'll build a simple discipline. Create a pause between stimulus and judgment. When you hear a claim that triggers you, don't grab it, hold it, treat it like a package left on your doorstep. You don't bring it into your house just because it arrived. You inspect it, you check the label, you decide what it is and whether it belongs. You can practice this in daily life with low stakes. The next time someone tells you this restaurant is terrible, don't instantly agree or disagree. Ask what they ordered, ask what they expected. Ask when they went. You're training your mind to seek context instead of conclusions. That training transfers into everything else. And you're going to need it because there's another trap that quietly ruins people: emotional reasoning. Emotional reasoning is when you assume something is true because it feels true. You feel anxious, so you assume danger. You feel offended, so you assume you were attacked. You feel hopeful, so you assume the plan will work. Feelings are signals, not verdicts. They can point to something worth examining. but they cannot be the final judge. Here's a real-world example. You're about to send a text in anger. Your chest is tight. Your thoughts are sharp. You feel justified. In that moment, your brain will produce a story that makes your anger feel righteous. If you hit send, you might win the moment and lose the relationship. The disciplined thinker builds a rule: no major messages in a storm. You wait. You breathe. You write a draft and don't send it. You revisit when your nervous system is calmer. That single habit is critical thinking applied to emotional life. It protects your future self from your present impulse. Now, to keep this sharp and actionable, you're going to adopt a small set of mental moves, not slogans, moves. The first move is to ask for definitions. When someone uses a big word like success, freedom, toxic, lazy, privilege, real, safe, healthy, ask what they mean. Most conflict is disagreement about definitions, not facts. If you define the terms, you reduce confusion instantly. The second move is to separate correlation from causation. In your own thinking, just because two things happen together doesn't mean one caused the other. Your business slowed down after you changed your logo. Was it the logo, or was it the season, the economy, the ads, the competition? Your mood improved after you started a supplement. Was it the supplement, or sleep, or hydration, or simply paying attention to your health? Don't let your brain make up cause and effect because it wants closure. The third move is to ask, compared to what? This is a powerhouse question. This city is expensive compared to what city? This job pays well compared to what role, what industry, what cost of living? This plan is risky compared to what alternative? I'm behind compared to whose life and what context? When you ask compared to what, you stop floating in vague judgments and you land on reality. The fourth move is to use a pre-decision check. Before you commit, imagine you're 6 months in and it's going badly. Not to panic, to prepare. Ask yourself what went wrong. Ask what warning signs you ignored. Ask what you should have measured. Then come back to the present and build guardrails. This is how you stay ambitious without being reckless. You don't shrink your goals, you strengthen your thinking. If this audiobook is bringing you value so far, take a moment to like it. Share it with someone who needs to hear this. Leave a comment with your biggest takeaway, and subscribe to Prime Audiobooks for more content like this. Now let's continue. There's one more trap you must master if you want to think sharper in the American environment: social proof pressure. Social proof pressure is when you treat popularity as truth. When you assume something is good because everyone's buying it, reposting it, or praising it. The crowd can be right, but the crowd can also be loud and wrong. You've seen this with trends, investments, outrage cycles, even health advice. When something goes viral, it feels validated, but viral is not verified. The disciplined thinker respects the difference between attention and accuracy. Attention is cheap, accuracy is earned, so build a habit. When you notice yourself wanting something, mainly because others seem to want it, pause and ask what you actually value. When you notice yourself believing something, mainly because it's repeated everywhere, pause and ask where the original evidence is. When you notice yourself fearing something, mainly because it's talked about non-stop, pause and ask what the actual risk is and what you can control. This is how you become calm in a world that profits off your panic. And here's the payoff that most people don't see coming. When you learn to spot these traps, you don't just make better decisions, you become more persuasive without trying. You become someone people trust because your mind is steady. You don't swing wildly from certainty to doubt. You don't cling, you don't posture, you examine, you adapt. and you move. That's leadership, not a title, a way of thinking. Now let this land in you with honesty. Which trap hits you hardest? Confirmation hunger, the story spell, the identity trap, the speed trap, emotional reasoning, or social proof pressure? Where have you paid a price for one of these without noticing at the time? What is one decision you're facing right now where you could slow down? Define the claim, challenge the story, and test your assumptions before you commit. And if you started treating being wrong as a normal step toward being sharper, what truth would you finally allow yourself to see? Chapter 3. Build your evidence engine. You've already started separating feelings from facts and refusing to let autopilot run your life. You learned how the mind twists reality through traps like confirmation hunger, the story spell, identity grip, speed pressure, emotional reasoning, and social proof. Now it's time to install something stronger than willpower, a personal system for finding what's real, fast enough to use in daily life, and strong enough to hold up under pressure. A sharp mind doesn't just doubt, it verifies. It doesn't just collect information, it tests it. And it doesn't just think hard. It thinks in a way that produces reliable decisions. Here's the truth most people miss. Information is everywhere, but evidence is rare. Evidence has structure. Evidence can be checked. Evidence can be weighed against alternatives. Most of what floods your day is designed to trigger you, entertain you, sell to you, or recruit you to a side. If you don't build an evidence engine, you'll keep building beliefs out of whatever happens to land in your feed. An evidence engine is a habit of mind that turns claims into questions and questions into proof. Think about how Americans buy things. A new phone comes out, people line up, watch reviews, compare specs, ask friends, check return policies. They run a mini investigation before spending $1,000. But then the same person will adopt a belief about health, money, relationships, or politics based on one clip, one headline, one emotional conversation. That mismatch is costing people years. Start with a mental rule for high-stakes decisions. You need at least 2 independent sources of evidence, and 1 reason to be skeptical of each. Not cynical, skeptical. Skepticism is not nothing is true. Skepticism is show me enough to trust. Picture a firefighter in Southern California getting a call. He doesn't sprint into a burning house based on a rumor. He checks his gear. He reads the smoke. He listens to the team. He assesses entry points. He gathers signals and decides. That isn't hesitation. That's professionalism. Your life deserves the same standard. Now let's build your engine. The first part is learning to recognize the difference between a claim and a measurement. A claim is someone saying something is true. A measurement is a defined way of checking it. People love this product is a claim. Repeat customers increased by 20% over 3 months is closer to measurement. This diet works is a claim. Average weight loss and adherence rates across a large group over time is measurement. This city is unsafe is a claim. Violent crime rate per 100,000 compared over 5 years is measurement. You don't need to become a statistician. You need to become a person who asks, how would we know? That question changes everything. The second part is learning to prefer primary signals over secondary noise. Primary signals are direct, your own tracked results, official documents, recorded data, first-hand observation, or well-supported reporting that cites its sources. Secondary noise is commentary on commentary, reposts without context, anonymous screenshots, and people repeating what they heard. Secondary noise is the modern swamp. It feels informative because it's loud, but it's mostly recycled emotion. So here's a discipline you can use immediately. Whenever something sparks strong certainty in you, ask yourself whether you've seen primary signals or only noise. If it's only noise, you don't have to decide yet. You can wait. Waiting is not weakness. Waiting is control. Now, evidence has quality levels, and this is where most people get fooled. Your brain is impressed by confidence, not by accuracy. A confident voice can make weak evidence feel strong. A polished graphic can make a sloppy claim feel scientific. A dramatic story can make a rare event feel common. So you'll train yourself to ask 3 simple questions about any piece of evidence. How was this gathered? What would this look like if it were false? And what's missing? How was this gathered means you look for the process. Was it a survey? How many people? Who were they? Was it a controlled test? Over what time period? Was it an anecdote? A single personal story? What would this look like if it were false means you imagine the same evidence appearing in a world where the conclusion isn't true. This breaks the spell of it feels convincing. A glowing testimonial could exist, even if the product fails most people, because a few lucky cases will always exist. A viral clip could exist, even if it's edited, because the edit is what made it viral. And what's missing means you look for the quiet parts. You look for the denominator. You look for the base rate. You look for what they didn't show you. A base rate is the boring truth. That keeps you sane. It's the typical outcome. In situations like this, if someone tells you, my friend quit his job and now makes 6 figures online, your mind wants to jump to possibility. Base rate asks, out of how many people who try this? How many succeed? That question doesn't crush ambition. It protects your time. Let me give you a real-world picture. A couple in Tampa is considering moving to a new neighborhood. They hear it's up and coming. They hear the schools are good. They hear traffic is not bad. They tour a few houses and feel excited. If they decide purely on vibe, they may end up with a commute that drains them, a school that doesn't fit their kid, and a budget stretched too thin. A sharper approach looks like this. They define what matters: commute time on weekdays, school performance measures and programs that match their child's needs, and a budget that leaves room for savings. They check primary signals, actual drive times during rush hour, school reports and parent feedback from multiple sources, insurance costs, property taxes, and realistic monthly payment scenarios. They ask what's missing: upcoming road construction, flood risk, neighborhood noise patterns, and future development plans. Same dream, different method. One creates stress. The other creates stability. Now let's talk about reasoning itself, because evidence doesn't matter if you can't think with it. Reasoning is how you connect facts to decisions without fooling yourself. Here's a powerful move. Stop arguing about conclusions and start examining premises. A premise is a starting assumption. If the premises are weak, the conclusion will be weak, no matter how loudly someone defends it. If someone says remote work is destroying productivity, the premise might be that productivity only looks like hours visible in an office. If someone says, I can't get in shape because I'm too busy, the premise might be that getting in shape requires long workouts instead of consistent short ones. If you fix the premise, the whole belief changes, and you can apply this to yourself without shame. When you feel stuck, ask, what premise am I living from? Maybe the premise is I must feel motivated to act. That premise keeps people trapped. A better premise is I act because I decided, not because I feel like it. That premise builds freedom. Now you need one more skill to complete the engine: the ability to update your mind without losing your confidence. Many people think confidence means never changing. That's false. Real confidence is the ability to change quickly, when reality changes, without panic and without ego. Think about a quarterback reading a defense. He doesn't call an audible because he's indecisive. He calls an audible because he's paying attention. That's strength. That's competence. So build this mindset. Your beliefs are working models, not permanent tattoos. Your job is not to be loyal to your past conclusions. Your job is to be loyal to reality. Here's a practical habit that makes this real. Once a week, choose one belief you hold strongly and run a gentle audit, not to tear yourself down, to keep yourself sharp. Ask, what is the best case against my view? Then ask, what evidence would honestly change my mind? Then ask, where might I be emotionally invested in staying the same? That last question is the one that separates disciplined thinkers from smart talkers. Now let's bring this into everyday life, where it matters most. Decisions with uncertainty. In America, you are constantly deciding under uncertainty. Career moves, money choices, health choices, relationships, parenting, leadership. There are rarely perfect answers. That's why your evidence engine matters. It gives you a way to move forward with confidence, even when you can't be certain. So adopt a simple decision rule. Decide based on the best available evidence. Set a checkpoint date and measure what matters. That turns decisions into experiments rather than identity statements. If you're considering a new job, define success measures. Income, growth, stress level, time flexibility, mission alignment. Set a checkpoint at 30, 60, and 90 days. Track what you actually experience, not what you hoped. Then adjust. If you're trying to improve health, define simple measures, steps, sleep hours, strength progress, how you feel at midday, how consistent you are. Set checkpoints and adjust based on results. This is how you stop drifting and start steering. And notice what this does to your emotional life. When you make decisions this way, regret decreases, not because every choice is perfect, but because your process is solid. You can respect yourself, even when outcomes are messy, because you didn't gamble your life on noise. Now let this settle. Your mind is either a sponge or a filter. A sponge absorbs everything and gets saturated with confusion. A filter lets in what's useful and blocks what's manipulative. Your evidence engine is the filter. If this audiobook is bringing you value so far, take a moment to like it. Share it with someone who needs to hear this. Leave a comment with your biggest takeaway. And subscribe to Prime Audiobooks for more content like this. Now let's continue. As you move forward from this chapter, think about the last decision you made based on a strong feeling and weak evidence. What primary signals could you gather if you were choosing again? Where in your life are you living from an untested premise? That needs to be examined. And what belief are you ready to hold with a lighter grip, so you can stay loyal to reality instead of loyal to your ego? Chapter 4. Ask questions that cut through noise. You've already learned to separate what you know from what you think and what you feel, and you've started spotting the mental traps that twist reality when you're moving too fast. You built an evidence engine, so you can verify instead of vibe checking your way through life. Now you're going to upgrade the tool that drives everything else: the quality of your questions. Your life is shaped less by the answers you have, and more by the questions you keep asking yourself. Most people ask questions that tighten the knot. Why does this always happen to me? Why can't I ever get ahead? Why are people so stupid? Those questions don't lead to clarity. They lead to self-pity, arrogance, or paralysis. A sharper mind asks questions that open doors, expose assumptions, and force reality to show its face. A question is a lever. A weak lever moves nothing. A strong lever moves your entire direction. Think about how Americans are trained to consume information. You're offered headlines designed to provoke. You're offered arguments packaged as entertainment. You're offered expert takes that often skip the boring details. In that environment, the person who learns to ask disciplined questions becomes almost untouchable, not because you know everything, but because you can find your way to the truth faster than the average person can find their way to an opinion. Start with the simplest upgrade. Replace "Is this true?" with "How true is this and in what conditions?" Most claims are not all or nothing. They're true sometimes, false sometimes, and misleading most of the time when treated as absolute. This shift makes you calmer. It also makes you more accurate. Now here's a tool you can use immediately: the 4-question filter. You run it whenever you're dealing with a claim, a plan, a fear, or a conflict. First, what do I mean by that? Your own mind uses vague words as a hiding place. I need to get my life together. What does that mean? Money, fitness, relationships, time management. My job is toxic. What does that mean exactly? No boundaries, disrespect, overload, poor leadership. When you define the words, you stop wrestling smoke. Second, what would I accept as proof? This question separates thinkers from talkers. If you can't answer it, you're not reasoning, you're performing. If you say this plan will work, what evidence would you accept that it won't? If you say they don't care, what evidence would you accept that they do? Your brain hates this question because it threatens certainty. That's why it makes you stronger. Third, what is the simplest explanation that fits the facts? The mind loves drama. It loves villain stories. It loves complicated narratives that make you feel important for seeing what others don't. But often the simplest explanation is the truest. The email was short because the person was busy. The friend didn't reply because they forgot. The deal fell through because the numbers didn't work. The simple explanation isn't always correct, but it's a better starting point than a fantasy fueled by emotion. Fourth, what action would make this clearer? This is where your questions become power. Instead of spinning in thought, you move toward verification. If you're unsure about a relationship, you have a direct conversation with calm, specific language. If you're unsure about a career path, you interview someone doing the work, and shadow if possible. If you're unsure about a business idea, you run a small test that exposes whether customers actually care. Clarity loves movement. Let's ground this with a real-world example. A manager in Minneapolis feels like her team is slipping. Deadlines are missed. Meetings drag. Energy is low. Her first instinct is to blame motivation. She starts thinking, they don't care. That thought makes her frustrated, and frustration makes her harsher. The harsher she gets, the more withdrawn the team becomes. Now she has a full cycle. That feels like proof. A sharper approach is question-driven. What specifically is slipping? Which deadlines, which projects, which people? What changed recently? Workload, tools, expectations, morale, clarity of roles. What constraints are they dealing with that I might not see? What metric would tell me if this is a skills problem, a systems problem, or a leadership problem? She asks. She discovers the team isn't lazy. They're overloaded and unclear. Two priorities are fighting each other. A new software system is slowing basic tasks. One teammate is quietly covering for another, who is struggling but afraid to admit it. Now the solution isn't motivation speeches. The solution is simplification, training, reassigning responsibilities and clear measurement, same situation, different questions. One path creates resentment, the other creates performance. Now let's talk about questions that protect you from manipulation. Manipulation works best when you accept the frame you're given. Someone offers you a frame like, either you support this or you're against us. If you really cared, you would do this. Everyone who disagrees is ignorant. The disciplined thinker refuses the frame. You ask, what's the third option? What's the incentive here? Who benefits if I feel rushed? What information would I need to decide on my own terms? In a world that monetizes your attention, your ability to reframe is a superpower. Here's another practical tool. The disagreement drill. When you disagree with someone, you don't start with your conclusion. You start with their strongest version, not the weakest, not the caricature, the strongest version. You try to state it so clearly and fairly that they would nod and say, yes, that's what I mean. This is not for them, this is for you. It prevents you from fighting a fake opponent. It forces your brain to deal with real complexity, and it exposes where your own argument is weak. Then you ask questions that search for overlap before conflict. What do we agree on? What are we both trying to protect? What trade-offs are we willing to accept? Those questions reduce heat and increase accuracy. You become harder to trigger and easier to respect. Now bring this inward, because the most important conversations are the ones you have with yourself. Most people interrogate themselves like an angry prosecutor. Why did you mess that up? What's wrong with you? Why can't you be disciplined? That style doesn't create progress, it creates shame, and shame creates avoidance. You need the voice of a calm investigator. What led to that choice? What was I optimizing for in that moment? What need was I trying to meet? What pattern is repeating? What would make the better choice easier next time? Notice the difference. The investigator assumes you can learn. The prosecutor assumes you must be punished. Punishment might change behavior for a day. Learning changes behavior for a lifetime. Here's a story that plays out in countless American homes. A father in St. Louis wants to get healthier. He tells himself he'll start Monday. Monday comes and goes. He stays up late, eats whatever is easy, and tells himself he has no willpower. He asks, why can't I just do it? That question is a trap because it points to character instead of conditions. A sharper question is, what is making the unhealthy choice the default? He realizes the fridge is full of convenient junk. He's sleeping 5 hours, and his evenings are chaotic. The problem isn't willpower. The problem is setup. He changes the setup. A simple grocery reset, a consistent bedtime, and a rule that the first meal of the day has to be protein forward. He doesn't try to become a different person overnight. He changes the system. That shapes the person he already is. That is critical thinking applied to self-development. You stop making moral judgments and start making intelligent adjustments. Now you need one more category of questions, questions that keep you honest. When you're excited, excitement is powerful, but it can make you sloppy. When you're fired up about a plan, ask, what am I assuming will be easy? What am I underestimating? What would have to be true for this to succeed? What would failure look like early before it gets expensive? What is the smallest test that would tell me whether this is real? Those questions let you keep the ambition without paying the price of fantasy. And you also need questions that keep you moving. When you're afraid, fear narrows attention. It tells you to hide. It tells you to delay. It tells you to make safe choices that slowly drain your life. When you're afraid, ask, what exactly am I afraid of specifically? Is it rejection, embarrassment, loss, discomfort, uncertainty? What is the likely outcome? Versus the worst imagined outcome. What is one action I can take that reduces uncertainty by 10%? Fear hates small actions. Because small actions create evidence. Evidence breaks fear's spell. If you build the habit of better questions, your relationships improve because you stop assuming and start understanding. Your career improves because you diagnose problems instead of guessing. Your finances improve because you stop following noise and start verifying. Your confidence improves because you trust your process, not your mood. You don't need more information. You need sharper questions. That force information to become evidence. If this audiobook is bringing you value so far, take a moment to like it, share it with someone who needs to hear this. Leave a comment with your biggest takeaway, and subscribe to Prime Audiobooks for more content like this. Now let's continue. So as you walk away from this chapter, ask yourself with real discipline, what vague word have you been using to avoid clarity? And what definition would make it actionable? What claim have you accepted? Without deciding what proof you would require to believe it, where have you been blaming character? When the real issue is conditions and setup. And if you committed to one new question this week, one question you will ask before reacting, before buying in, before spiraling, what question would instantly make you harder to manipulate and easier to lead? Chapter 5. Decide like a professional. You've learned to separate feelings from facts, to recognize the traps that bend your perception, to build an evidence engine that verifies instead of guessing, and to ask sharper questions that cut through noise. Now it's time to turn all of that into something that changes your life, where it counts most, your decisions. Because critical thinking isn't proven by what you know, it's proven by what you choose. Most people treat decisions like personality tests. If I choose this, what does it say about me? If I change my mind, will I look weak? If I hesitate, will I miss out? That's how people get trapped. Bad jobs, bad deals, bad relationships, bad habits. They're not deciding based on reality. They're deciding based on image. A disciplined thinker decides like a professional. A professional doesn't rely on mood. A professional doesn't get seduced by hype. A professional uses process, judgment, and accountability, not to be perfect, but to be consistently better than yesterday. Here's the first hard truth. You will never have complete information in real life. Especially in America where everything moves fast. You decide under uncertainty. The goal isn't certainty. The goal is strong odds, controlled risk, and clear checkpoints. So you're going to learn to think in probabilities, not promises. When you say this will work, you're speaking in absolutes. Absolutes invite disappointment and ego fights. When you say this has a good chance of working if these conditions hold, you're speaking in reality. Probabilistic thinking is not timid, it's accurate. It makes you calmer because you stop demanding guarantees from a world that doesn't offer them. Picture a couple in Dallas deciding whether to buy a house. They fall in love with the kitchen, the backyard, the neighborhood. Their emotions are loud, and emotions are not the enemy. But emotions can hijack the steering wheel. If they treat that feeling like a guarantee, they may stretch their budget, ignore inspection details, and gamble on future income that hasn't arrived yet. A professional style decision asks different questions. What's the worst-case scenario if interest rates rise or one income drops? How long could we cover the mortgage with savings? What costs are likely beyond the payment? Repairs, taxes, insurance, maintenance. What is the opportunity cost if we buy now versus wait 6 months? They're not killing the dream. They're defending the dream from the future. That's decision hygiene. Clean thinking before the commitment, so you don't pay with chaos after. Decision hygiene has 3 pillars: framing, risk control, and review. Framing is how you define the decision. Most people frame decisions emotionally. Do I take this job or not? A better frame is, which option best serves the next 2 years of my life, given what I value and what I'm willing to trade? That frame forces you to consider time horizons and trade-offs, not just impulse. Risk control is how you limit the damage of being wrong. You don't avoid risk, you manage it. You build guardrails, you set a budget for mistakes. You avoid decisions that can ruin you in one move. Review is how you learn. Without review, even smart people repeat dumb patterns. They blame bad luck and never upgrade their method. With review, you get sharper every month. Let's break this into a practical approach you can use for anything: career moves, relationships, money choices. Step 1. Write the decision down in one sentence, not in your head, on paper, or in your notes app. Writing exposes vagueness. Vague decisions create vague outcomes. A clean sentence forces clarity. I am deciding whether to accept the marketing manager role at Company X. I am deciding whether to move to Denver this summer. I am deciding whether to end this relationship. Simple, direct, real. Step 2. List your criteria, not a long fantasy list. 3 to 5 criteria max. The criteria are what you will actually use to judge success. If you choose too many, your mind will cherry pick later. Keep it honest. If you're choosing a job, criteria might be growth, stress level, compensation, alignment with values. If you're choosing a relationship path, criteria might be trust, communication, shared goals, emotional safety. Step 3. Identify the deal breakers. Deal breakers are conditions that automatically disqualify an option, not preferences. Deal breakers. If you don't define them, you'll negotiate with yourself. When you're emotionally attached, a deal breaker might be, I cannot afford the payment without touching retirement savings. I will not accept a role with constant weekend work. I will not stay in a relationship where respect is inconsistent. Deal breakers protect your future self from your present rationalizations. Step 4. Run the incentive check. Ask, what incentives are shaping the information I'm receiving? In business, in media, in relationships, incentives are always present. If a recruiter tells you the role is perfect, they're incentivized to fill it. If an influencer tells you a product is life-changing, they might be incentivized by sponsorship. If a friend tells you to do what they did, they might be incentivized to validate their own choice. Incentives don't automatically make someone wrong. They just tell you to verify. Step 5. Run the second-order effect check. First-order effects are the obvious immediate outcomes. Second-order effects are the downstream consequences that show up later. A promotion means more money. That's first order. Second order might be less time with family, more stress, less health, or fewer creative opportunities. Moving to a new city means excitement. First order. Second order might be losing your support network, changing expenses, changing your daily habits, changing your identity. People get burned because they decide on first-order effects and then act surprised when second-order effects arrive. A sharp thinker asks, and then what? Step 6. Create a small test whenever possible. Not every decision can be tested, but many can. Before you quit your job to start a business, Test your offer on nights and weekends before you move across the country. Spend a week there, in the rhythm of normal life, not just vacation mode. Before you commit deeply to a new direction, run a pilot. Small tests reduce uncertainty. They create evidence. They protect you from story spells and social proof pressure, without you having to fight those forces with pure willpower. Step 7. Set a review date before you decide. This is critical. Most people decide, then drift, or they decide, then cling, even when reality changes, because admitting it feels painful. When you set a review date, you give yourself permission to update without losing confidence. You're not waffling, you're executing a plan. You might say, I will review this choice in 30 days, or 90 days, or 6 months. The point is to choose a moment, to look at actual outcomes instead of living on hope. Now let's make this hit home. A scenario that's extremely American: career identity. A man in Nashville is offered a job that pays more than he's ever made. He wants it because it feels like proof that he's finally made it. But the role is in a company with a reputation for burnout. The hours are brutal. The leadership is unpredictable. His ego says take it. His fear says don't risk it. He feels torn. A professional decision process helps him separate desire from reality. He writes the decision. He chooses criteria. He defines deal breakers. He checks incentives. The recruiter is selling hard. The hiring manager is vague about workload. He checks second-order effects. Higher pay could be traded for health, marriage, and long-term performance. He looks for a small test. He asks for a realistic week in the life schedule. He speaks to current employees privately. He examines turnover. Then he makes a choice with eyes open. Maybe he takes it with strict boundaries and a 60-day review date. Maybe he declines and pursues a different path that builds sustainably. Either way, he respects himself because he didn't outsource the decision to ego or fear. This is what disciplined thinking looks like in real life. It's calm, it's direct, it's grounded. Now let's talk about another decision trap: confusing confidence with commitment. Confidence is how you carry a decision. Commitment is how you execute it. Many people feel confident in the moment, then fail to commit in behavior. They tell themselves a new story, then keep the old routine. A sharp thinker closes the gap by pre-committing to actions, not big dramatic vows, specific actions tied to the decision. If you decide to get healthier, you pre-commit to a grocery plan and a consistent bedtime. If you decide to improve your finances, you pre-commit to automated savings and a spending review. If you decide to rebuild a relationship, you pre-commit to one hard conversation with calm language and a clear request. Critical thinking without action is just entertainment. Your mind is not here to impress you, it's here to direct you. Now you also need one more discipline: post-decision peace. Many people make a choice and then torture themselves by replaying every alternative. That is not thoughtful, that is self-sabotage. Once you decide using a strong process, you execute, you adjust at the review date. Until then, you focus. A professional athlete doesn't take a shot and then collapse into debate mid-game. They take the shot, reset, and play the next possession. Your life works the same way. Decide, execute, review, update, move. If you build this, your critical thinking becomes visible. People will feel it in the way you speak. You won't be easily rushed. You won't be easily sold. You won't be easily dragged into other people's drama. You'll become the kind of person who can handle complexity without losing discipline. If this audiobook is bringing you value so far, take a moment to like it. Share it with someone who needs to hear this. Leave a comment with your biggest takeaway, and subscribe to Prime Audiobooks for more content like this. Now, let's continue. So look at your life with clear eyes. Where have you been deciding based on image instead of reality? What decision are you facing right now? That needs a stronger frame, clearer criteria, and real deal breakers. What incentive have you been ignoring? That might be shaping what you're being told. What second-order effect are you pretending won't matter later? And if you committed to deciding like a professional, with a written choice, a small test, and a review date, what would you finally choose with confidence? And then back up with action. Chapter 6. Live sharp, lead your life. Up to now, you've trained yourself to separate feelings from facts, to notice the traps that quietly bend perception, to verify with an evidence engine, to ask questions that slice through noise, and to decide like a professional with framing, risk control, and review. That's not theory anymore. That's a new way of moving through the world. Now the final step is the one that makes everything permanent, turning sharp thinking into identity-level habit. So it shows up when you're tired, when you're pressured, and when no one is watching, because critical thinking isn't a skill you turn on for special occasions. It's a standard you live by. It's how you protect your time, your money, your relationships, your health, and your self-respect. In a culture that constantly tries to rent your attention and sell you certainty, most people don't lose their freedom in one dramatic moment. They lose it in tiny compromises. They click without thinking. They buy without verifying. They argue without defining terms. They stay silent when they should ask one clarifying question. They accept narratives because narratives feel easier than uncertainty, and over time, they become reactive, not because they're weak, but because they never train the mental discipline required to stay in control. You are training that discipline. Now, to make this real, you need one powerful shift. Stop treating thinking as something that happens in your head, and start treating it as something you practice through rituals. Rituals are what your future self will thank you for when life gets loud. Start with a morning ritual that takes less than 2 minutes before you open your phone. Set an intention for how you will think today, not how you will feel, how you will think. You tell yourself, I will not confuse urgency with importance. I will not accept claims without evidence. I will not let emotions write my conclusions. I will slow down when the stakes are high. This isn't motivational fluff. This is a mental contract when you repeat it daily. You build a default setting, then build a midday reset. Most people lose their sharpness in the middle of the day. They get hit with meetings, texts, news, stress, and they slide into autopilot. Your reset is simple. Pause, breathe, ask, what problem am I solving right now? What matters most in the next 3 hours? What is the next right action that creates clarity? That one question pulls you out of drift. Then build an evening review, not a long journal session, unless you want it, a quick mental check. What decision did I make today that I respect? Where did I get emotionally hijacked? What did I assume without verifying? What would I do differently tomorrow? This is how you transform every day into a training day. If you do those 3 rituals, you will become sharper without needing inspiration. You will build consistency, and consistency is the real advantage. Now let's talk about the hardest place to stay sharp: relationships, because emotions are loudest there, and ego hides best there. Critical thinking doesn't make you cold, it makes you fair. It helps you avoid mind reading, catastrophizing, and story spells that poison trust. It helps you communicate with precision instead of accusation. But here's the level up. Sharp thinking also means knowing when to stop arguing. Many people keep fighting because they believe the right explanation will finally fix it. But some conflicts are not about misunderstanding. They're about values, incentives, or unwillingness. So use this standard. If someone repeatedly refuses clarity, accountability, or basic respect, stop negotiating with reality. You can still be kind, you can still be calm, but you don't keep pouring your life into an arrangement that requires you to abandon your standards. That is critical thinking applied to self-respect. Now another high-stakes zone is money. Money is a test because it mixes fear, desire, social proof pressure, and identity. People spend to feel successful, to feel safe, to feel loved, to feel powerful. A sharp mind brings the decision process into the financial world without shame. When you feel the urge to buy, pause and ask, what problem am I trying to solve? Is this solving a real need or an emotional gap? What is the second-order effect on my future freedom? Then you decide like a professional. You set limits. You verify claims. You look at base rates. You run small tests. You review outcomes. A disciplined thinker doesn't just earn more, they keep more, they waste less. They become harder to manipulate with status and scarcity. Now let's talk about the battleground you're surrounded by every day in the USA. Attention. Your attention is your life. What you pay attention to is what you become. And the world is built to pull you into reactive cycles. Because reactive people are profitable, they click more, they buy more, they argue more, they stay distracted, they stay controllable. So if you want to live sharp, you have to defend your attention like it matters, because it does. Build an attention rule. No news, no social media, no email before you set your priorities. Not forever, just first. If you start your day letting the world tell you what matters, you will spend the day cleaning up someone else's agenda. Build another rule. You don't consume hot takes without context. You don't watch rage content for entertainment and call it staying informed. You don't let outrage become your personality. You choose sources with standards. You verify. You wait when evidence is thin. You stay calm enough to think. That calm will change your life. Now here's the part where you turn all 6 chapters into one unified way of being. You create your personal code. Your code is simple. You don't need to announce it. You just live it. You treat feelings as signals, not verdicts. You spot traps before they spot you. You build evidence before you build certainty. You ask questions that define reality. You decide like a professional and review like a student. You protect your attention like it's money because it's worth more. This code is what makes you dependable, not just to others, to yourself. And when you live this way, something powerful happens. Your confidence becomes grounded, not loud, not fragile, grounded. Fragile confidence needs agreement. Grounded confidence needs truth. Fragile confidence collapses when challenged. Grounded confidence updates when challenged. Fragile confidence performs. Grounded confidence produces. Now you might be thinking, what if I've already made bad decisions? What if I've already wasted years? Listen closely. Your past is not a prison, it's data. If you treat it as shame, you repeat it. If you treat it as evidence, you learn from it, and you move. There is no too late for sharper thinking. There is only the next decision. That's the door you always have access to. The next decision. So here's your final challenge, and it's direct. Pick one area of your life where you've been drifting, just one. Your health, your money, your relationships, your career, your habits, your confidence. Choose the one where the cost of fog is highest. Then apply the entire system. Define what you mean. Name the claim you've been living by. Identify the traps that pull you into the same pattern. Gather primary signals, decide on criteria and deal breakers. Run a small test, set a review date, execute. Learn, update. Do not wait for motivation. Motivation is a visitor. Discipline is a resident. You are building a resident mind. This is how you become the person who doesn't just talk about change, but creates it. Because sharp thinking is not about sounding smart. It's about living well. It's about building a life that holds up under pressure. It's about becoming the kind of American adult who can handle complexity without losing character, who can face uncertainty without panicking, who can lead themselves without needing constant external validation. And when you become that person, you influence others without trying. Your family feels it. Your coworkers feel it. Your friends feel it. Your kids, if you have them, feel it most of all. They learn from your standards, not your speeches. They learn that truth matters, that verification matters, that calm matters, that courage matters, that you can be confident without being arrogant, that you can be skeptical without being cynical, that you can be ambitious without being reckless. That's legacy. If this audiobook is bringing you value so far, take a moment to like it. Share it with someone who needs to hear this. Leave a comment with your biggest takeaway, and subscribe to Prime Audiobooks for more content like this. Now let's continue. Now let's close this with power, because you didn't come here to collect ideas. You came here to change how you live from this moment forward. You do not outsource your mind. You do not surrender your attention to noise. You do not let emotions write conclusions without evidence. You do not accept frames designed to control you. You ask better questions. You verify. You decide with process. You review and improve. You become the person who can be wrong without breaking, who can change course without shame, who can face reality without flinching. That is strength. And strength is built, not wished for. So when the next headline tries to hijack you, you pause. When the next trend tries to rush you, you slow down. When the next argument tries to recruit you, you define terms. When the next fear tries to shrink you, you reduce uncertainty with action. When the next opportunity tries to seduce you, you test the ground. You think sharper. You live freer. Let the final questions land, not as pressure, as direction. What part of your life has been running on autopilot? And what would change if you demanded evidence and clarity there? What story have you been telling yourself that feels true? And what would reality look like if that story were wrong? What is one decision you've been avoiding? And what would a professional process tell you to do next? And if you committed, starting today, to defend your attention, verify your beliefs, and act on disciplined choices, who would you become in 6 months? And what would your life look like a year from now? If you refuse to stay foggy any longer,